It's funny, isn't it, how much we talk about thinking outside the box as if it's some kind of universal virtue, a clear path to success and innovation. We hear it in boardrooms, in creative workshops, even in self-help books. But what does it truly mean to step outside that metaphorical box? And what's the real cost, beyond the motivational posters and inspirational quotes? I've spent a lot of time pondering this, and what I've come to realize is that being outside the box isn't just about unconventional ideas. It's about a fundamental divergence from the norm, and it brings with it a surprising mix of freedom and profound loneliness. Consider something as simple as an outfit. If I choose to wear something that mainstream society considers unconventional or even shocking, I immediately appear outside the box to most people. I might feel a sense of liberation, a defiance of expectations. But if I switch to something more widely accepted, I slip back inside the box, conforming without much thought. This isn't just about clothes, it's about opinions, beliefs, and even lifestyles. I might hold a deeply different opinion on a social or political issue, and while some people might grudgingly concede my right to that opinion, they're often doing so from within their own conventional framework. They might even see themselves as being outside the box for acknowledging my right to disagree, when in reality, they're still firmly rooted in the mainstream, simply tolerating a slight deviation. This leads to a crucial realization. While I might have the right to a different opinion, expressing it openly can be detrimental. If I voice my outside-the-box thoughts too loudly, too often, I risk being perceived as radical, as an outlier. And in a society built on connections and opportunities, being seen as too far outside the norm can have tangible consequences. It can lead to fewer job prospects, less social interaction, and a general sense of being marginalized. So, while we champion freedom, what we're often talking about is the freedom to make choices within a predefined, acceptable framework. Step too far beyond that framework, and you become isolated, and finding your way in the world, securing a livelihood, becomes significantly harder. The metaphor of the box, then, isn't just about appearance or abstract thoughts. It's about social conformity and survival. When I truly embrace an outside-the-box mindset, diverging significantly from mainstream thought, I become an anomaly. And the price of that freedom, I've found, is often loneliness. People inside the box, those who adhere to societal norms, tend to steer clear. It's not necessarily malice, it's a pragmatic self-preservation. They worry that associating too closely with someone outside the box might brand them as outsiders, jeopardizing their own opportunities and social standing. So, while I might gain a profound sense of personal freedom, a clarity of thought that few ever experience, I often find myself standing alone. But it's more complex than just one big box. When people tell us to think outside the box, they're usually not suggesting we abandon all societal structures. More often, they're referring to smaller, more specific boxes within the larger one. For example, in a business context, thinking outside the box might mean finding an innovative solution to a problem within the existing market. I'm still operating within the big box of commerce and societal expectations, but I've broken free from a smaller, more restrictive framework of traditional approaches. This kind of outside-the-little-box thinking is generally lauded, as it contributes to progress without threatening the fundamental order. I'm still part of the system, just a more adaptable part. It's when you get completely out of the big box that the true isolation sets in. You find yourself among a very small number of individuals who share your perspective, or perhaps entirely alone. History is filled with examples of people who truly stepped outside the big box, the revolutionary thinkers, the scientific pioneers, the artistic visionaries. They saw things differently, conceived ideas that challenged the very fabric of existing understanding. But their journey was rarely easy. They often faced ridicule, resistance, and ostracism. They had to fight to convince the rest of society that their outside-the-box invention or idea was not only valid but beneficial. They had to expand the existing box, effectively, to accommodate their new discovery. Yet, even after their inventions became widely accepted, the innovators themselves often remained somewhat outside, viewed with a lingering suspicion by those who had initially resisted them. Their groundbreaking work might be embraced, but their unconventional spirit, their initial deviation, often kept them at a distance. This realization brings me to a quieter, perhaps more melancholic, truth. There are countless people living inside the box who secretly hold outside-the-box opinions. They might deeply agree with a radical idea or harbor a profound dissent from mainstream thought, but they keep it hidden.
Why?
Because to voice those opinions, to openly identify as outside the box, would mean risking their livelihood, their social connections, their very security. So, while I might feel utterly alone in my outside-the-box convictions, it's entirely possible, even probable, that I'm surrounded by many who silently agree, but who have made the pragmatic choice to remain hidden in plain sight. And finally, it's worth noting the socioeconomic aspect of this phenomenon. Historically, many of the truly outside-the-box thinkers who managed to survive and even thrive often came from privileged backgrounds. They had the financial resources to absorb the setbacks, the rejections, and the periods of isolation that inevitably accompany challenging the status quo. They could afford to be misunderstood, to pursue unpopular ideas, because their basic needs were met. For the vast majority of humanity, however, survival dictates conformity. We follow the trends, adopt the mainstream opinions, and keep our more radical thoughts under wraps, not out of cowardice, but out of necessity. The freedom of being truly outside the box, it seems, is a luxury that few can truly afford. I've often pondered why certain ideas, once dismissed as radical or far-fetched, eventually become mainstream. It's a fascinating societal phenomenon, and I believe the answer lies not just in the inherent goodness of an idea, but in its demonstrated utility. We can see this pattern repeated throughout history, a testament to humanity's pragmatic side. Take, for instance, the long and arduous fight for women's suffrage. For decades, the notion of women voting was largely ridiculed. It was seen by many as a quaint, romantic ideal, something divorced from the serious business of governance. The prevailing thought was that women belonged in the home, tending to domestic duties and raising children. Political involvement was considered unseemly, perhaps even unnatural, for them. The idea didn't gain traction simply because it was a nice concept or a morally sound argument, though it certainly was both. Instead, a crucial shift occurred when society, out of necessity, saw women step beyond their traditional roles and prove their indispensable value in a more public sphere. When men went off to war, women weren't just waiting at home. They were filling factories, running businesses, and keeping essential services operational. They demonstrated an undeniable capacity for organization, leadership, and resilience that went far beyond the domestic realm. It was this pragmatic display of their abilities, not just an abstract appeal to equality, that truly moved the needle. Society realized that to fully function and progress, it couldn't afford to sideline half its population. Granting women the vote wasn't just about fairness. It became about acknowledging their vital contributions and integrating them more fully into the fabric of society for the greater good. It was a recognition that their outside-the-box potential was, in fact, incredibly useful and necessary inside the box of national life. This pattern isn't unique to women's rights. We've seen it with the civil rights movement, where the undeniable humanity and contributions of African Americans, despite systemic oppression, eventually forced society to confront its prejudices. The fight wasn't just about moral rectitude. It was about acknowledging the full citizenship and capabilities of an entire community that had been systematically disenfranchised. And now, we're witnessing a similar process unfold with the transgender and non-binary communities. As these individuals become more visible, as their contributions to art, science, business, and daily life are recognized, and as the struggles they face become more understood, society is slowly but surely moving towards greater acceptance. It's a slow burn, but the more their value and humanity are seen in a pragmatic light, the more likely their rights and recognition will be fully embraced. So, if I were to champion a new, progressive idea for a community, I would always bear this in mind. The path to acceptance isn't solely paved with idealistic arguments. While those are crucial for framing the moral imperative, the real breakthrough often comes when society sees the tangible benefit, the pragmatic value, of embracing those outside-the-box ideas. It's about making it clear that these new perspectives aren't just romantic notions, but essential components for a more robust, equitable, and ultimately more functional society.